Welcome to Knowledgeable Aging. I'm your host, Jason Kotar. Joining us today to talk about planning across advisors, what 60 and 70-year-olds wish they knew in their 30s and 40s, is Genevieve Lenz. Genevieve is a duly licensed integrated financial wealth advisor. She is currently one of the leading planners with the largest independent financial firm in the Mid-Atlantic, First Financial Group. As an advocate for her business clients and member of the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors, she has been educating the public since her role as Vice President Financial Consultant at Charles Schwab in 2008. How are you doing today, Genevieve?
Doing great, Jason. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for joining us again. This one is going to be a really interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to it. But before we get started, for those that are joining us for the live webinar, if you have any questions, type your questions into the chat box. Time permitting, we will do everything in our power to get your questions answered. So Genevieve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jason. Once again, thanks for having me back. I appreciate the knowledge that I get to share with everyone across the country. And I appreciate you for putting these things together. And we were discussing this earlier offline. It's really important that we continue to share these kinds of resources, especially in this ever-changing world. So kudos to you for getting a lot of professionals together to service the public and get education going. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
So today, everyone, we're talking about what your future self, right? If you're 60 or 70 years old, what you wish you knew in your 30s and 40s. And this kind of brainchild came to me from having many, many meetings, lots of times with 62, 64, 67 or 68-year-olds. And I was tired of hearing them say things like, oh, I wish I met you 15 years ago, or, oh, I wish someone had told me this 20 or 25 years ago. And they simply just didn't know, right? It's just a simple fact of no one told them some of these things that we're going to discuss today. So as we get going, or even before we get going, if you have a pad, a paper, a tablet, maybe your cell phone, some way to take notes, I'm going to be giving you 7 tips today that you're going to want to write down. Some of them may apply to you, some of them may not. But I think it's really important that we start talking about these types of things. So even if they don't apply to you today, they may in the near future, or it may be something that's helpful for a family member or a loved one. So we all have this fear of different things that are out in the world. Some of us have more fears about things changing than others. But we know one thing, what you don't know can hurt you, right? If you find out later on that you took your pension or you took your Social Security or maybe a distribution from your IRA and you could have taken it in a different way that could have given you more money later on for your future years, wouldn't you be upset, right, that someone didn't tell that to you? So today's presentation is really about giving you some of those nuggets, things that you may have thought about, some things that you haven't thought about, and discussing where you're at, right? Everyone's at a different place. So you should be asking yourself, what are you struggling with right now? What are questions that you have? Maybe you've written them down, maybe you haven't. I would encourage you to do so. Those questions are things that you should be taking to your advisors, your accountant, maybe your attorney, business partner. These are things that you need to jot down so that you can start to address them. And then if you've got them written down, then you can start to peel back the layers of the onion and figure out if you're on the right path. So one of the main questions that we're asking ourselves today is, do you have an accountant? Do you have a financial advisor? Do you have an attorney? Any professional that's bringing ideas to you? Or are they simply just checking boxes, right? Are they simply just filing your taxes? Are they simply just doing an annual review or a checkup with you? This can hurt you if you don't ask questions when you go to these meetings or demand that you're getting more service when you're visiting with these professionals. So the way that this is structured and the way that I think it should be for most of the individuals that I get the privilege of speaking with is discussing your life like a mountain, right? You really want to think about, who do I need to know? Who's going to help me climb my pre-retirement mountain? And who's going to help me descend or climb down the retirement mountain? And one of the best ways to do that, tip number 1, is have a financial plan. So you should be writing that down, right? Write down, have a financial plan and regular checkups, right? It's like a medical visit. You wouldn't just go see your doctor if you were taking medication once a year, because that doctor wants to check and see, is it the right amount of medication? Are you improving? Should we change the medication? Should we maybe take less, or do we need to increase your dosage? Or maybe you need to, change your diet or do something else. Financial planning is regular, it's consistent, and it has to be revisited at least once annually. And you'll find that if you're meeting with someone and you're doing this financial checkup, which you can see on the screen, that a lot of the goals, a lot of the concerns, those worries that are keeping you up at night, the financial calculations that need to be run on your behalf, that all kind of works its way out. But if you don't have this plan and you're kind of winging it and just sticking money in that 401k every year and hoping that it's just going to grow and everything's going to turn out okay, chances are you could be one of those clients that I sit in front of in their 60s and really wish that they could have a do-over or wish they could turn time back. Mention this retirement mountain to you, right? It's really, really important that you take this away from today's presentation, because during the accumulation phase, which is if you're in your 30s and 40s and 50s, you're adding money to this bucket. You're putting it into an IRA. You're adding it to your TSP or your thrift savings plan or your 401k, whatever vehicle you have. And you're worried about putting enough in there, right? And then when you get to the apex of whenever you decide to retire, some of us it's going to be earlier than later, you're also wondering, well, how am I going to take distributions from this? Did I put enough in there? So if you can see these boxes in the center, it's going to be very different working with your advisor and your team of advisors if during accumulation some of these things were to happen, right? We worry about dying too soon. What if we didn't save enough? What would happen to our family? Do we have the right type of life insurance? Do I make enough income? Box number one. And if I were to get sick, if I got cancer, if I couldn't go to work, is my income going to continue, right? Am I going to have some kind of cash flow that's going to continue to support my needs, my lifestyle, and even that of my family? Volatility is a big one, right? We don't mind it so much in our 30s and 40s. We think, yay, great. The stock market just went up 30% and we're making money. But what if the stock market goes down 20 or 30%? Then, that's a worry later on in life. We also think about tax deferred vehicles, which all that is a fancy term for IRAs, right? Anything you're putting money into today that you're going to not pay tax on today, but you'll pay tax on later on. So when you're working, it's the best thing ever. We're all excited and we want to max out that 401k and you're putting money into those buckets. But maybe there's some things that you should be thinking about that's not just putting it all in tax deferred. And then of course, we all worry about inflation, right? Maybe I need to earn more money, change jobs, get a bigger bonus, higher salary so that I can keep up with inflation. And on the distribution side, well, look at it's completely different from what we just talked about. Now, instead of dying too soon, we're going to worry about if we live too long. What if I run out of money? What if I don't have enough and I live well into my 90s? You're going to worry about your assets. Did I save enough when I was working? And can I take it out strategically so that it's there for me and helps support me? Right? We're definitely worried about volatility. Don't want to see any of that on your distribution side. You want to keep that nice and steady, no crazy market swings so we can create predictable income. And then we worried about, okay, well, those tax deferred vehicles that we put in all that time, those IRAs, those 401ks, well, now what happens? You have to pay tax on your distributions. And that could be a huge hiccup if you're not planning for that correctly. And then we're worried about spending, right? That goes without saying. We don't want to keep spending and spending and then find out that you're going to be out of money in 10 years, okay? So tip number 2, as we move away from that mountain, and hopefully that was a good visual for you, and one of the ways to protect the cash flow as you're going up the mountain and down the mountain is have a budget. Revisit cash flow. I can't stress this enough. People that come to me and say, oh, we're fine. There's always enough money in the checking account. We don't need to revisit that. We can pay our bills. Well, maybe you'll find out inadvertently that you didn't realize that you were paying $6,000 a year in Starbucks, or that you gave one of your children a loan that was actually meant to be paid back when they got their big bonus, and you do need some of that money back. So revisiting budget, revisiting cash flow, not only on your own, but also with an advisor is going to be one of those key things. And finding ways to save more, right? If you're budgeting, if you're paying attention to, gee, I don't really need to go out to eat 3 days a week. I can go out to eat 1 or 2 days a week and then save that money, right? I'm going to need it in the future. Maybe that's the way you can save. Another tip on here is looking at your fixed expenses. There's people that I know that we can call and make sure that we can negotiate your bills. So that's a tool. So contact me at the end if you want those contacts. And then just be educating yourself. You want to educate yourself about tax law changes, and that's one thing that your advisors will do for you. Probably for the sake of time, I'm going to skip a little bit on this slide, but we just want you to be always on the move, always asking questions, always educating, asking your financial advisor things about your taxes, asking, how they get licensed and how they get paid, and, are they aligning their goals and their needs with your goals and needs, right? And that really should be said without, much concern, because hopefully you have that in place. But if you don't have that really fluid relationship with the advisors you're working with, then I can connect you with some that can help you. So please reach out at the end of today's presentation. And it says on the bottom here, if you're listening today in your upper 50s, early 60s, and you haven't had a Social Security analysis run for you, or you haven't had a pension analysis, that's one of the things you should ask your advisor about as well. So write that down. Those things that are going to give you future income, people should be running analyses on those and helping you determine, oh, well, really, I'm only going to get $2,000 a month for that, and that's $24,000 a year, and that's not as much as I thought it was going to be. So it's better to find out about that earlier than when you're 2-3 years away from retirement and there's really too little you can do about it. So ask an expert. Another thing you want to be cognizant of is sometimes having the right type of healthcare and life insurance later in life is going to pay off in spades. You have no idea how many people miss this mark because they talk to an advisor that only talks about investments. Okay, you can't just talk about investments. It's not just a one bucket show. It's not just going to be investments in Social Security that's going to help you in retirement. It's going to be a culmination of what type of healthcare you have, how you sign up for Medicare, how costly those things are or not. Life insurance can be used as a vehicle to pay you tax-free income if it's set up properly. But once again, you've got to catch that early. You've got to catch that in your 30s and 40s. You can't be sitting there in your 60s when your term insurance is about to expire in 2 to 3 years and say, oh, I wish somebody had told me that 20 years ago. So contact me if you need resources in this area as well, okay? Tip number 3. Know the status of your income. I'm not going to beat the drum on this very long, but you really need to figure out if your income were to stop, if you lost that job, if you got sick, if you got disabled in a car accident, know that that paycheck would not stop. Know how your employer, or if you're self-employed, how that disability income check would come to you, right? Is it going to be a percentage of your income, maybe only 50%? Is it going to be taxed? Is it not going to be taxed? So you should be writing this down if you're listening today. Tip number 3, know the status of your income prediction. By the time you get to 60, it's really too late to worry about that. Number 4, it's a big one. It's a really big one. So inquire with your tax professional or your advisor if a Roth conversion may be ideal for you and your spouse, okay? Really, really important here. Why is this important? Because I see so many people shifting money from a paycheck to the 401k, from a paycheck to the IRA, and they're very excited because it lowers their taxes today. Well, if anyone's been watching the news, you probably have an idea that taxes are going to go up. The government just spent trillions of dollars of stimulus during COVID, and I mean trillions and trillions of dollars. There's no way to get out of this situation without raising taxes, right? So if that's the case, this little snippet, this little cartoon that I put on here says a lot, right? He's looking at this tree, and the tree could have been his Roth IRA instead of a regular IRA. And in some cases, you work for a company that offers a Roth 401k in addition to a regular 401k. And really, perhaps you should be putting some money in there, because once the money goes in, you pay tax on it up front, it grows, and it grows and grows and grows. And there are no taxes on those distributions in most cases. So that's going to be very, very key. It makes me very sad when a client gets to their mid-60s and is sitting on a $3 million plus IRA, maybe it's $1.5 million, whatever it is, and all of a sudden they have to start taking distributions. And at age 72, which is a big age as well, they have to start taking what's called the RMD, which is the required minimum distribution. The government saying, aha, you now have to take X percent out of your account and you owe us the taxes on that percentage. I just had a client last month whose RMD amount is going to be 6 figures. So inadvertently, and unbeknownst to this poor client at age 66, they were taking money and putting it away all those years, and now their required minimum distribution coupled with their Social Security is actually going to pay them more than when they were earning in their working years. So do I call that reverse tax planning? Yes. You don't want that. You want to talk to your tax professional today, talk to your advisor. They should be collaborating to help you in this area. So very, very important. Tip number 4, please write that down. Now, flipping into tip number 5, right? If you haven't updated your estate plan in a while, this is also very, very important, right? I don't like to run into clients like what happened to me during my Schwab years. There I was, I received a phone call one day and I could hardly recognize the voice at the other end of the phone. And this was indeed one of my best clients. He used to bike to my Schwab office to see me for his reviews. It was phenomenal. He was very fit. I'm a fellow biker. I bike for charities, and I couldn't recognize him. And what had happened is he actually had a stroke. Didn't mean for this to happen, had no idea this was going to happen, but he was 57 years old, ran his own company, was making, lots of money and having a wonderful life, and it all came to a halt. Okay, it came to a halt because we didn't look at some of the things that he had. We didn't look at his disability policy. We didn't look at his estate plan. We didn't look at his power of attorney. Okay, some of these things that he needed to have in place. What if you can't talk for yourself and you're still living? Do you have a medical directive? Do you have a financial directive? These are some of the really sticky things, and you never know when life's going to throw you a curveball. So even if you have this and you can say, yes, I did this, I did, tip number 5. Well, in 2013, the estate law went through a huge change. And last year in 2020, guess what? It went through another huge change. So the government keeps us on our toes. They change the laws every 6 or 7 years or so, sometimes sooner. So if your plan is 6 or 7 years old or older, that means you have to sit back down with your estate planning attorney, right? Might be just something as simple as crossing T's and dotting I's, might be something as simple as just kind of rewording some of the same documents, but you need a new signature with a new date, right? And all these boxes on the side are all part of a good, comprehensive estate plan. So don't just go see somebody and say, I need a will, because typically they'll give you a box of things and they'll give you a little package. It doesn't cost a lot of money, right? It's just a will, a living will, your financial and medical power of attorney. All those things should be buttoned up in one nice little package. So please write that down. Revisit your estate plan. Even if you did it, 4 or 5 years ago, it's probably a good idea. If you did it since COVID, you're probably good. You probably did it in the last year or two, you're probably all set. Tip number 6. Now we've been kind of hinting in this, and I've been saying this as we've been going along. Are your key professionals collaborating for your overall success? Oh, and we jumped ahead to a different screen. Hold on here. There we're back. This is important. And why is this important? When a client has money going into tax deferred buckets and they think that that's in their best interest and they're excited that their 401k has now gone from 900,000 and 990 and now it's hit the million mark, all they can see is that the money's growing, but they don't necessarily see what would happen if that continued to grow, like the client we just mentioned, and all of a sudden in their 60s and 70s they have this huge nest egg that they haven't paid tax on. Most of the time, and then this is what I find with all the clients I work with, most of the time it's going to be needing a little bit of both. Okay, you're going to need a little bit of tax deferred and a little bit of taxable. You're going to want something on both sides of the coin, and wow, wouldn't it be great if you could get something that's tax-free? That can't happen with just one advisor, right? Can't happen with just your financial person. They don't know all the ins and outs of when you filed your taxes and how much you owe and your tax bracket and how to plan that. So it has to be a dual approach. It has to be your financial advisor talking with your CPA or your accountant at least once a year, right? Try to get those two people to talk and collaborate together, right? It also has to be your estate planning attorney. They can write the most beautiful documents and say you want all this money to go to your 2 children and your spouse, and isn't it lovely? They can wrap it up and tie it with a bow, but it's just as good as the paper it's written on if it sits on a shelf. Then you have to take those documents with your financial advisor and retitle some accounts, right? Go back and get the deed to your property and put that into those documents, into the trust or into the document. So really, really key that your attorney and your CPA or accountant, whoever you do your taxes with, are talking with your financial person at least once a year, especially during times like this. COVID has been ever surmounting change. Something's coming up every week, something new. Please be on top of it. Please have your professionals talk to one another. Okay. And the last one here, bullet number 3 says, have your advisor reach out to your insurance professional. That's another big key. I got asked by an attorney the other week. She said, I don't understand why the financial people only talk about financial assets and growing, that 401k or those investment accounts. And they never talk about life insurance. And life insurance can be so useful when people are later on in life. And some of it is really tax efficient. And she said, well, why are the life insurance people not talking about the other thing? They're just talking about life insurance and they only live in this bucket. Well, those days are gone. You can't afford to have people just talking about one or the other without some kind of collaboration between the two. Okay. This is a great slide and I jumped ahead and you got a snippet of it. I'm going to just stop here because every single client that I work with and every client that my colleagues and other professionals work with deserves some type of financial plan that's going to be integrated, right? They deserve to know what's going into their tax deferred or IRA or 401k bucket and how is it taxed today and how is it taxed later on. They deserve to know how their taxable assets are going to act. Could be just money in the bank, could be money in CDs, or maybe some stock that you inherited from a family member. You need to know how that's taxed, right? It's going to probably change here. It was maybe 15% or 20% capital gains, but once again, those things might change. And then everyone deserves to have a tax advantage bucket, right? That really at distribution could come out at 0% tax. So find out who your professionals are, find out if they can collaborate and give you some of this knowledge today before you get to your 60s and 70s and find out it's too late. And the last one is tip number 7. And far too often I'm sitting in front of those same clients, right, 60, 70 years old, and they have this bucket and they're really proud of it. And I'm really proud of them that they organized it and they saved, they were diligent. All those years they just put money away and squirreled it away. And now they have no idea how to turn on the water faucet and make it come into income. They have no idea how much income it could produce. They have no idea anything about it. They have no idea how to make a sliver of that or a portion or half or even more turn into guaranteed income, right? And it's funny because we talk about their Social Security, we talk a little bit about their pension, and those are income sources that they're counting on. And they assume that they can take money out of the investments that they've been saving into and replicate some of that into a paycheck, but their advisor has never showed them how. They never even had a discussion about it. And so some of those discussions maybe don't have to start in your 30s, but definitely by your mid to late 40s, 50s, you need to start thinking about what portion of that investment can I put away and can I guarantee that it's going to give me a paycheck, right? So we talk about some people that's $25,000 a year, some people maybe it's 50, right? If your Social Security check is only going to pay you a measly $32,000 a year and you can't live on $32,000, then you're going to need a higher amount that's more guaranteed to pay your fixed expenses in retirement. So very, very important to think about how you're planning to replicate a portion of your paycheck in retirement. Okay. And I want to stop here and recap those 7 tips because this is a short day that we're spending together, but I am available to recap these one-on-one. I know later on there's going to be some resources that I would love to email to you and share with you, so please be in touch. But please make sure that if you missed any of these tips today that you do write this down. So number 1 was have a plan, have a regular checkup, just like your doctor's appointment. Have it with a certified financial planner, have it with somebody you trust. Not everybody has to have CFP after their name. Some of those people aren't the best people to contact, right? They might be only unilaterally licensed. They might not have the insurance licenses and be connected with all the CPAs and attorneys that you need. Periodically review your budget. Every single year, my husband and I sit down, and you should too, right? You should think of what's changed last year, what's changing next year, right? Was there a sickness that cost us a lot of money? Are we changing our house? Do we have a higher mortgage, lower mortgage? Talk about where that money's going and continue to save. Make sure your savings is a place that you're continuing to protect. Pay yourself first, right? Save. Number 3, can't stress that enough. If you don't know how your disability paycheck would come to you, if you haven't checked that box that you checked with your employer when you first got hired, go back and revisit it. Find out if it's only going to be 40% or 50% of your income. And then on top of it, it's going to be taxed. Not many people can survive on such a little paycheck. So you want to make sure that you know the tax law changes that are related to your disability protection and address that. Number 4, big one. We said big one, huge. Biggest one I can think of on today, other than making sure you do budgeting and meet with an advisor, is make sure you're contributing to a Roth 401k, a Roth IRA. Make sure some of your money, even if you can't contribute because you're earning too much money, guess what? You can do a backdoor Roth. That's something your advisor should have brought to your attention, right? So very important. You want to update your estate plan every 6 to 7 years. Number 5, you want to have your key professionals collaborating for you. And number 7, you want to replicate your paycheck in retirement. So get some tips on how to do that as well. That's it, Jason. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thank you, Genevieve. Got a couple questions that have come in. First question is, what if your investment professional has not spoken to your accountant or brought up your taxes in a conversation with them? Are you suggesting that they change advisors?
Not necessarily suggesting they change advisors right off the bat, but you should be bringing that to them. You should say, look, I attended a seminar. I was told that I should be speaking with you and my accountant together, and ask them if they'd be willing to speak to your accountant. And I also ask your accountant if he'd be willing to talk to your advisor, and get those people together to talk about the opportunities to do some Roth planning. So I would start there. If they're not willing, or it's just not going to happen, then maybe it is time to interview and consider working with a different advisor.
Okay. Next question. My life insurance expires in 4 to 5 years. Should I just let it expire?
Okay, well, that depends on the individual situation, right? In most cases, I would encourage that client to look at their policy and see if it has a convertibility option, right? So you're telling me if the person has insurance that's going to expire its term, right, which means they bought it for 15, 20, or 30 years, and now they're at the end of that term, chances are if there's a convertibility option, it may have passed, but they may have an option to migrate some of that term that's expiring into permanent life insurance. And then they can use some of that permanent insurance later on in life. Really big benefit. Sometimes people use their permanent insurance to even help them pay long-term care expenses. So that's something that you should consider and ask your advisor about.
My financial advisor, all they do is talk about diversification and growing my money. How do I know if they have the ability to create income in retirement while helping me manage my taxes and fees?
Okay, so let me just repeat that to you. I'd say they're only talking about growing the money and investing in the market, not talking about future income and taxes. Is that what you're asking? I would say that you need to bring that up in the next review that you have. And if they're not having regular reviews with you about things that are other than just your portfolio, that to me is a red flag that they should consider interviewing someone else, because if they haven't brought it up already, chances are they're not holistic and they're not even helping you see some of the different possibilities. So that would be a red flag to me to say, hey, interview 2 or 3 other people, ask someone at work, ask me. I'm connected with advisors in over 12 states. You can probably find somebody that's going to give you a little more value from the get-go, as opposed to just revisiting the same thing year after year.
Should my financial planner always be a fiduciary?
I would say it's in your best interest, right? If they are a fiduciary, that means they're not selling a product, they're not pushing a mutual fund or something else. They literally signed an agreement, and they could lose their licenses if they're not doing what's in your best interest. And that means across the board, from taxes, from fees, future income, investments. I would say having an advisor that's a fiduciary is very, very important.
Other questions come in terms of income replacement during retirement. Do you tend to lean more towards annuities, or do you look to dividend or other passive investment income?
I actually look to both. I like both. It depends on the client. It depends on how many other guaranteed income sources they have, right? If they have Social Security and his and her pensions from government or something, they probably don't need another annuity per se. I love dividend producing stocks. I love setting up dividend producing income portfolios, but I also realize that some people do need some sort of annuity, and the ones today are very low cost. They're not your mother's or father's annuity. In fact, you could probably get an annuity for the same price as what you're paying in your 401k or less today, and a lot of people don't know that. So I would use both depending on the client. Yep.
Last question. Somebody asked, outside of your CPA or financial advisor, who else should be in this team?
Okay, so outside of your financial advisor and your CPA, who else should be in the team?
In your life insurance, I mean, who else should be in your financial team, or is that the only
Okay,
professionals that should be looking for?
so I would say there's 5, right? Financial advisor. If
Okay,
your financial is insurance licensed, then you don't need an insurance professional. You've got that in one, which is
got it.
great. If your business, it's a business attorney or estate planning attorney. Sometimes you'll need both of those. Then there's, of course, the CPA or the tax professional. And then there's usually someone that's going to help you make decisions on health insurance. Your health insurance, your Medicare, your Medicaid, well, not Medicaid, but health insurance is a big way where people lose money, especially as they're moving to the non-working years. They might take the wrong Medicare supplement. They might take Medicare at the wrong time. They might forget to file, especially if they're working later into their 60s or 70s. And you don't want to get it wrong because then there's penalties. So your health insurance provider is someone that I would also bring into the fold. And I connect clients all the time with key professionals in Medicare, Social Security, health insurance if they need it.
Excellent.
Does that answer the question, Jason, I think?
It does. It does. Thank you. So how does somebody get a hold of you to access the resources that you provide?
All right, well, that's a good question. If you have more questions, if you need any of the resources that I mentioned today, let's talk. You can email me. There's my email here below. You can even just give me a ring. If you don't want more email in your box, just give me a ring, leave me a voicemail, let me know a good time to reach you, and I'll be happy to send you any of these resources. I generally send them out digitally. Once again, I can send them out snail mail, but digital is the way we get them across to you, and I'll be happy to share any of that with you. So thanks again, Jason, for asking and for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Genevieve, if you don't mind, if you could spell out your email and your phone number for those that will be listening on our podcast later, please.
Sure. My direct line here in Reston, Virginia is 571-375-8040. And my email is my first name. It's spelled Jenev as in Victor, IEVE .lenz, LENZ as zebra, at ffgadvisors.com. So that's Frank George advisors with an S.com.
Excellent. As far as Knowledgeable Aging, you can go to our website, knowledgeableaging.com, see all of our upcoming and archive webinars. Go to our YouTube page. I encourage you to subscribe. We update that page as frequently as we can. If podcasts are your thing, you can find us on Apple Tunes, Google Play, etc. Until next time, I'm your host, Jason Kotar. This is Knowledgeable Aging.